Are we ready?
I'm ready.
Time?
It is time,
Okay, well, I did it last time, so you should do it.
right?
You remember, right, when you did it last time?
I do. Yeah. Wait, no? I remember when you did it.
Wait, that's not what I said.
No, you're like, you remember, right? When you did it last time?
Oh, well, I meant when you did it, meaning you remembering that I did it.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, because I was there, because that was me.
Because you were there.
Yeah. All right. So, Paul, as you know, this is the measure of an episode because this is the podcast that you've been doing for over 2 years, where it is our continuing mission to explore what makes Star Trek proper Star Trek and not just fantasy island in space. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Paul. And what is Fantasy Island? Is that a show?
Yeah,
I
with
think it's
Khan.
in Vegas.
No, with Khan Noonien Sung and Zipplane Tattoo, I think was his name. Where people would come to the island and they would make their fantasies come to life, and it taught them moral lessons, which didn't happen in this episode, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
So a lot like Lost.
I guess. Did they learn things in that show? I mean,
No.
we didn't.
The audience certainly didn't. Yeah, the
Right.
audience didn't learn anything. And the criteria by which we judge these episodes, number one, is there science fiction explored in the plot? Number two, is that science fiction unique or novel in some way? And number three, is there a moral or ethical dilemma? I am Sir Paul.
And I am Sir Galahad, the Chaste.
Oh, that's the name of my penis. And what do we watch, Jonathan?
Spelled different.
One word.
So we watched the Elysian Kingdom. The
Elysian.
Kingdom. All right. And the blurb says the USS Enterprise becomes stuck in a nebula that is home to an alien consciousness that traps the crew in a fairy tale. Is that what the blurb says?
Yep.
Okay, nice.
That is what the blurb. You memorized it perfectly.
I got it off of Memory Alpha, so don't fault me for it.
Kind of a spoiler in this
In the
blurb here. It actually is a blurb this time. Bravo. But yeah, the whole thing where it's like an alien consciousness in the
I guess that's true.
the nebula.
Yeah.
Like that would have been nice not to know. I actually is what made me excited about the episode. I like these weird consciousness plot lines. I think they're fun.
Right? Yeah, I agree.
That's the end of my anecdote.
Oh, okay. There wasn't a but. There wasn't an end.
We can move on now.
I do too. I like I'm thinking of the Picard Robin Hood, or what this episode really reminded me of. I was trying to remember the name of it, and that was as far as I got. I didn't actually try to look up the name of the episode, where Kirk, Bones, and I want to say Scotty, they all went to that planet where like their memories became real. Do you remember like the Easter Bunny was there and Kirk's like old Irish drinking buddy was there? Do you remember this?
I don't think so. I don't think we've seen. The thing is about this show, this podcast, is that in terms of the original series, the only episodes I've seen is what we watch. So I have no baseline.
Okay, so that doesn't sound familiar. Like that's stuck in my head, but it might just be because of when I watched it originally.
The plot line kind of in general felt very original series. Next
Absolutely.
Generation. Like it just kind of felt that way. I feel like though in practice, not. This episode is the first time it has stepped out of its, I was going to say glory hole, but it's not really. Glory circle. The glory of Strange New Worlds being the best thing that ever happened to Star Trek since the new Trek happened.
Okay.
Right? Like, that's what I meant. That's the glory hole I'm talking about. It climbed out of its glory hole. And I feel like I didn't like this episode. And I'm sure you're going to tell me something, Jonathan, that totally flips my brain because there was something hidden or some sort of deeply embedded analogy or metaphor that I missed.
No,
but
there's
in
just
terms
a
of
deep,
on the surface.
Right. No. There was just a deep Easter egg that is like they don't talk about it. They don't reference it in any way. It's just in there. And it's just shocking. So, yeah.
Okay. Are we there yet?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, so this episode is very much a doctor episode.
Yes. Are you sure? I mean, it really was the doctor's daughter, if you want to get down to it.
That's true.
But okay, so I mean, just talking about how it is the doctor's daughter, like one thing that immediately stuck out at me at the very beginning was how holding her in the buffer pattern has been inconsistent just in these 8 episodes. Like earlier he was saying that no time has passed for her, which is why she's in the buffer pattern, and she doesn't realize the time has passed when she's coming out. And he said that he doesn't know when she's going to when she's going to go back into the buffer pattern. That's what makes it so hard on him, is because he doesn't know how much time he's going to get with her with each time that she's there.
So to me, it seems like the reason she's running out of time is because he keeps waking her up to take blood or to try an experiment. And so the minutes keep clicking by, slowly but surely. I do have one sort of caveat.
No,
what?
I'm sorry. I got it. So he keeps taking her, like you just said, he keeps taking her out to take blood to test her, but no time is passing for her. So he takes out
draining her. But
right. He takes out like 2 ounces every 30 seconds.
Well, that's my complaint about this whole premise, is that she's not sleeping either. Right. And you need to be materialized to sleep. So is he letting her sleep sometimes so she can like wake up and just not be just a mess? Because that's 8 hours of time. Because, I mean, maybe he's just chipping. Maybe for her, it's really just 5 minutes at a time to read the story and to take some blood. But he can't take blood. That's a very good point. But yeah, there must be times, and maybe that is what we're supposed to infer, is that she has to sleep.
Right.
And she has to regenerate in some way. And that's where the time is going.
Yeah.
But I think really what happened was people on Twitter don't like this storyline, and they saw all the Twitter threads and like, well, we got to get rid of the daughter then.
Yeah, and that was kind of like the biggest frustrating thing for me. Yeah, again, spoilers for the end. But then what was the point of the daughter? He didn't find the cure, and he doesn't have he knows that she's safe and that she's fine. Like it was just this weird thing that has been building for 8 episodes with a very lackluster culmination.
Yeah, and I was expecting a wealth of episodic fodder for this, right?
Yes.
Where he has to embed her pattern with somebody else. So we need the Tuvix episode.
Oh,
obviously.
right, yeah.
Obviously.
Yep. Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, or something happens to the ship and they lose the buffer and he thinks he's lost his daughter, and there's a whole episode around that where the Enterprise crashes or something like that, or something happens where he thinks she's dead. That, all these things that can happen to her.
So cool. Yeah.
Right. It's such a precarious situation that the daughter is in. Not just because of her disease, but also because she's sort of being stored digitally for most of the time. And they just abandoned it. I mean, I get the impression that they wrote all of these in succession. Like they aren't writing them and then shooting them and then writing them and then shooting them.
Right.
So I can't imagine that they had enough feedback from people where they're like, look, people aren't liking the daughter thing. Let's ixnay on the otter day,
right.
And they just got rid of it. And they made up this whole episode. Although I have to say, this episode feels like they made it up at last minute, right?
Well, kind of, because the other part of it too is that the Elysian Kingdom, like the book that he's been reading, has been in there from episode 1, or at least episode 2, and so they've been planting that this storyline would take place. But having said that, again, like all of the story plot points that were in this episode were presented at the beginning of the episode. They haven't really talked about the story before this. So it was almost like kind of what you're saying. Like they didn't really know what the story was going to be until they got to this episode. And they were like, okay, so now we need to talk about what happens in this book. So when it's happening in real life, he can be like, wait, that's happened in the book, which is one of those things that always frustrates me about these kind of shows. I mean, even just something as sitcom-y as How I Met Your Mother or Friends, where they introduce something in that episode where they're like, you've always done that. They've been talking about this book, so this was a great payoff to the book, but they haven't talked about the plot points, which I feel like they should have. So that would have given these scenes just that much more of, not of a punch, but just kind of a like, oh yeah, like they set this up beforehand, or, oh, this is cool to see what they were talking about in real life or something.
So there's that, and I feel like we don't, as you said, we don't have enough exposure to what the story is. They were even giving us these flashbacks of the pictures on the page of like, this person is this person in the story.
Right.
And we're supposed to know what that means. What should have happened was they should have done a play at the beginning of the episode where everybody's playing the part. So we have a little bit of context of what, like how sometimes on Next Gen they would have a play or a musical segment where they give us quite a bit of, we get a verse and two choruses,
Right.
usually. So I feel like we needed a little bit more context for that to land because it didn't seem to matter anyway, meaning you could have taken away those flashbacks to the pages of the illustrations and it wouldn't have made a difference. Who cares? I mean, it was kind of fun to see all of the different characters playing very antithetical to who they are. They've let their hair down now twice in this season, and we're only 8 episodes in.
Right.
So I guess that was fun. I still feel like we haven't quite earned that yet.
The goofiness?
I don't know. The goofiness. Yeah, I feel like we're just kind of starting to get to know these people. So this idea that, this is so against type for these characters that we barely know didn't quite land for me. And then there's this importance. It's almost like they plucked this episode from season 3 and threw it in season 1 somehow. And it's supposed to have the same emotional impact or at least recognition of the characters. It's sort of like the episode about number 1, Una.
Right.
Where it seems like a lot of stuff is culminating in this episode about the character that we have no background for.
Yeah. Yeah, which is really interesting because the episodes that we've seen, like aside from the Una episode and this episode, they really take their time with the characters and the world building and all that. But those 2 episodes, it feels like they're info dumping in like a, granted in a really good way. Like those episodes are not like just describing things. There is a lot of show versus tell. Maybe in this one not so much, just because the doctor keeps saying like, "Oh, this is in my daughter's book."
It seemed like just the book was there, and they thought, "Well, let's make something out of the book." And maybe they were seeding it enough. I mean, he reads it 2 or 3 times throughout the course of the last 7 episodes.
Right. Just how great would it have been if like we did see those scenes more visually rather than just him reading it, but like we zoom in on the dot. We do a close up. What am I trying to say? Not we zoom in, but like the camera focuses on the daughter, and either like through just some way we realize that she is picturing what's happening in the book. And even if it's just kind of like a great animation, like from Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, or from like Candyman or something like that, where they do just a great animation over it. So she's picturing these characters from the book doing these scenes, and then we get to this episode, and now we see these characters, we see the crew taking these characters, and we already have a relationship with the book characters because we've seen them.
Yeah, we needed a Marvel-esque opening where there's that montage of them giving us backstory about Mrs. Marvel or other Marvel characters, Mr. Marvel,
right,
and whatever,
Marvelina,
yeah. Marvoso. That sounds like a comic character.
I know, but yeah, like it. To be fair, that's not really a Star Trek thing to go to an animation in an episode or even like a flashback in that way, because it's not really a flashback. It's what the kid is picturing.
Yeah, well, branch out. Like I don't know. It's like, if we're gonna do something like this where it matters to the plot. Like, we need context because what we got was not enough.
Right.
And I could see it being enough to have a 1 to 2 minute little cool stylized animation at the beginning, voiced over by the doctor.
Right.
And we get a sense, and it doesn't even seem to be related to anything that's happening in the show. It would have been interesting if there was some sort of parallel plot line that
yes.
where the book is one thing and something going on with Pike or whatever the crew is another thing. But that didn't seem to be there. Maybe I missed something. I mean, we've missed things before. It's happened.
Right. Actually, that would probably have made this a little bit better, where they are I mean, it's kind of inner light, so that might be cheating a little bit. But where something happens to the doctor, where he gets a head injury, and all of this is happening, and like so, it looks like he's in a coma or just traumatic brain injury or whatever, but we're in his mind where he thinks he's on, like, all of this is still happening, basically how the episode played out, but it turns out that it's all in his mind. And like when he has this final scene where he does let his daughter go, when he wakes up, he goes to check and she's still like she's gone. She's not in the buffer pattern.
Right. I'm kind of glad it wasn't a dream or a hallucination because I would have had to have stopped watching the show at that point.
I mean, Paul, you really should tell me how you really feel about these things.
I mean, I was happy with it being, I'm glad that they kind of made it obvious that it wasn't a dream.
Right.
I guess maybe it wasn't obvious. Maybe that was just me hoping.
Well, that's the thing too. Like he's now the only one who remembers those 5 hours. And based on Next Generation, the crew is going to investigate the shit out of it to try to figure out what happened in those 5 hours.
Exactly. This has happened before in the future. But what about I forget his name every damn time. Hammer? Is that his name?
Hemmer, yeah.
Hemmer or Hammer?
Hemmer.
Hammer.
H-E-M-M.
Right.
Yeah, like a tailor.
H-E-M-M is pronounced hammer?
Yeah,
Is it German?
I was just going to say that.
Ha-ha! Why doesn't he remember?
Right.
He's got all of the telepathic shit.
Right. So, I mean, it could be that once he let the nebula back into his mind, like the nebula was able to take away the memories of what's happened. But the inference that I got was that he actually had been part of the story the whole time as well. And so even though it was acting like Hemmer, it actually wasn't Hemmer.
Oh.
That seems like much larger of a stretch saying it out loud, thinking about all the actions that he made. But
well, at a certain point, if it truly is all in his head, you can say anything. If it's about some sort of alien taking over the consciousness of the crew, you can say anything. That's why I don't like these types of episodes, because you can just say anything happened because of the consciousness thing, and then it's taken care of. It's just not super creative.
Right. So here's what I will say with you just kind of talking about that. Like I thought that Pike was playing it up as well. Like he was aware as well, because it didn't seem like he was playing at least my perception was it didn't seem like he was playing a coward. It seemed like he was playing Pike pretending to be a coward, which, there's a subtle but important distinction there. And so, like everybody else seemed like they were playing the part, but Pike seemed to be playing Pike, who was pretending to be this foppish dandy.
I feel like the person who really sunk into their character was Ninian Soong.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
She nailed it.
She was not on enough. Yeah. Yeah, she was great.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning for a second, because it was occurring to me that, okay, so why has he maintained his consciousness when everybody else hasn't? Mm-hmm. And we get the explanation as to why Hemmer did.
Right.
And to me, I thought that when we have that, intense montage of the doctor mixing salt into some Kool-Aid, and then it kind of explodes on him. By the way, that was a really cool, like, containment force field that happens.
Yeah.
We've never seen that before. And I was like, that's great. That's what I want to see. I want to see stuff like that, because that obviously would happen.
Right. Yep.
And sometimes they would do that in Next Gen, where they would wall off the whole sick bay, like from floor to ceiling.
Right.
We've never seen like a dome force field come up. I loved it. I mean, if it truly was bad, then the doctor was totally toast.
Right.
Because he just took a big breath in it. But I was thinking, and they never come back to this, that whatever he inhales is stopping him from being taken over by the alien. Mm-hmm. But then I guess it made sense that we're supposed to infer that the daughter was allowing him to maintain his, because it's her invention.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, which one do you buy? I like the first one. I like my idea better.
Right. I do too. And yeah, they kind of like talked about it. He's like, maybe this is a hallucination from inhaling those drugs, but because that wasn't explored anymore, and he was like, this must be coming from my daughter because of their relationship, that makes me think like that is what we were supposed to infer.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
I don't know, I was kind of disappointed about that. But the Ren Faire begins, right? Mm-hmm. And it did feel like, so when the doctor goes back to sickbay, and he has to grab like a tricorder and some sort of scanner or something like that. And he starts using it. And Nurse
Chapel.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I thought of it by myself. Nurse Chapel is So it turns in, she's like, sees this thing. And we have to now watch the same scenario that happens when you go to the Ren Faire and you fuck with the Ren Faire employee by trying to make them explain your Coca-Cola.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
It's that kind of, that thing is like, what is this magical light beam device? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and additionally, I loved the irony of Hemmer going abracadabra and using the communicator to transport the people out of the hall. And he's like, the magic of science. Like, no, that's still magic. You're using technobabble to explain it, but we can't do that yet. Like, that's legit magic.
Well, it's science to him.
Well, I know, but this is a
nice.
science fiction show, so it's fictional science. Like, you know, it's explained magic. That's what it is.
Right. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. But that moment where he beams them out of there kind of deflated all of the stakes, because I felt like there were stakes, even though there kind of weren't any.
Right.
Was anyone really in peril?
We don't know. I mean, because this is the first time we've seen the nebula. We don't know if the nebula would have allowed, if Deborah would have allowed these people to die, or if it was just literally a kid's fairy tale. I mean, fairy tales are kind of bloody and violent anyway. But,
That's true.
You know, because his daughter, Rukia? Rukia, yeah.
Okay.
Or if it was just Rukia, like because Rukia knew all these the crew members, that the nebula was not going to kill them. You know, like we haven't seen the nebula enough to know which one it was going to be.
And was the ship transformed with all of the leaves and the smoke and etc., or was that all in their heads?
Right.
And also, when people get shot, I think Una shoots people with a bow and arrow.
Oh yeah, she did.
Are those crew members?
Yeah.
Or like, did she kill crew members, or were those just kind of imaginated?
I like imaginated. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like something Disney would say. It's stupid, like when they hand you something. Have you imaginated today? So I don't know. I feel like this episode, this is the first example where the writing, I could see the writing and I could see the acting a little bit. Mm-hmm. It felt a little hokey to me. And I know it's supposed to be a silly episode, but it just kind of felt like they were all standing in a line saying their lines, and the lines weren't particularly interesting. Like, they weren't imparting they weren't clever. There wasn't something, maybe that's because it lacked the depth of some sort of parallel, not B plot, but something that, like, maybe the doctor was working on, or the ship was going through, that was paralleled in the story. And so it just kind of felt like they were saying these silly lines a la Ren Faire. Like, it felt very Ren Faire to me.
Right.
And I really appreciated how cool the ship looked. I felt like they had the setting perfect. Mm-hmm. You could not have done a better job.
Right.
It's just the story didn't make sense. It wasn't going anywhere. It's kind of just a lame story. It felt like they were just trying to dress up their cast in ways that were silly and against type for the sake of the silliness.
Right. Well, yeah, and I mean, part of it was usually in these episodes, the character, like when they're placed in this fantasy realm, you know, wherever it is, however it is, like the character learns something about either the alien themselves or the situation through this process. And that didn't really happen with the doctor. Like, the doctor didn't grow personally at all, other than he doesn't have this baggage that he has to hold on to anymore.
I do feel like the doctor went the other way. He didn't have an arc, or maybe he did have an arc, but I feel like at the end of the episode, he does a very irresponsible thing, which is turn his daughter over to the unknown nebula consciousness without knowing anything about it.
Right.
All he knows is that it took over his daughter somehow, aged her very quickly. We don't know. He knows nothing else about that.
Right.
Would you do this for your kids? I mean, he knows so little about this entity.
Well, right. Like, so because the nebula could take over everyone, I feel like the way this episode should have gone was, I mean, even this doesn't really explain it, but I mean, you're going to have some suspension of disbelief where the nebula does enter the doctor's mind and kind of like reassures him that his daughter will be safe with the nebula, you know, and it's not just Hemmer speaking, and it's not just the daughter going, I want to go, you know, everything like that. it's the doctor getting some confirmed reassurance from the nebula that his daughter will be safe.
Right. And I don't know, I wouldn't believe my child. I mean,
Exactly.
there are children who beg to go swim in the rain canal.
Exactly.
You
right.
know?
Yeah.
It's like-
you don't trust your child to say like, I want to do this. And you're like, oh, okay. Like you.
Well, you said you wanted to, so can't argue with that.
Right. Exactly. Like there should, because the thing is, even knowing that my child is going to be safe, to lose like right now, his child is safe. Like, yes, he loses time every time he takes her out of the buffer pattern. And like, that is something that he deals with every time he does it. He knows where she is. He knows that as long as he is around, she is safe. And now he is basically releasing her to an unknown entity. He's basically expecting to never see his child again. Like, that's what this is boiling down to. And as a parent, that's an impossible choice. Like, do I keep my child with me knowing that she has an expiration date, no pun intended, and like dark pun intended, or do I let her go to this entity knowing that I'm never going to see her again, but knowing that she will be released from the body in a way, I mean, in a way that is intentional, and that she will still retain her consciousness in a way that I would not know if she just died. Like, that is such a difficult choice. And, that's where the ethical, the moral dilemma was. And obviously he talked about that with the entity, but they didn't really give the doctor any sort of reassurance, which I don't know, maybe that was kind of the point, but if that was the point, then he should have kept his daughter, which is what I thought was going to happen, because the whole episode he has to choose between the daughter or the stone. Like, that's how the book goes. And then at the end of this episode, he's like, you are the stone. I have to let you go. And I'm like, then what are you keeping in return? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, the ending was so implausible that I thought it was going to end with the daughter going back into the box. That's where I thought it was going, because it seemed like there's no way that they're going to, first of all, end this whole plot line that they've been setting up for almost every episode.
Right.
And now they just kind of fix it.
Yeah.
By the way, there was a point where the nebula offers for the doctor to go in her place, and the doctor then immediately turns to his daughter and says, all right, let's get your bags packed. You're going with the nebula.
I missed that. I'm going to have to go back and watch it. He's like, you can't take my daughter. He's like, well, you can go. Huh. All right, daughter. Well, yeah. I'll miss you.
Kisses.
Right. So, I mean, because of how anticlimactic, that's the word I'm looking for, how anticlimactic this resolution is for the daughter, I genuinely hope that this nebula comes back around in a later season. Even if, there's like, even if the daughter is part of the B plot where she's able to kind of control her aging, which is why like she aged 20 years in 3 seconds, but now she's still that same age when they come back around again or something. Either she's the instigator of the conflict, or she's a B plot, and he does get her back.
If she can come visit, I mean, I kind of am getting some Q vibes here. Not necessarily that it is Q, but some sort of Q-like type of thing where they can go wherever they want, whenever they want. Mm-hmm. And maybe she can transcend the confines of the nebula and go wherever she wants. She can bounce around, and she kind of becomes that kind of character.
Right.
That would be cool with me. I felt like, though, that they didn't set that up very well, if that's the case. Like, it seems very fairy tale-like in terms of the writing, where they needed some way to talk to the entity, and Hemmer's like, you can speak through my body. Hopefully I can, it didn't feel very scientific. It felt very fairy tale. And I understand that is kind of the theme of the episode, but we're still on a Star Trek show.
Right.
And even if they don't bring it back later, it just didn't feel like they thought it through. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, a good example of that is they talk about how a nebula could spontaneously just have consciousness. They called it something that I should have written down, but I didn't write it down.
Yeah, it's like Bosman's brain.
Yeah, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's not as cool as if the nebula evolved a consciousness, that over eons, it created some sort of neural network of whatever. And it's just this giant brain that spans light years that is sentient. and conscious. That's way better than just talking, like giving it a line, a throwaway line that's like, oh, it's theoretical. We've heard of it. It's this thing. And then all of a sudden it's handled and then it's boring.
Mm-hmm.
It felt so abrupt at the end where it's like, oh God, so nobody remembers except for the doctor and even Hemmer, who was awake the whole time. And did he tell anybody that the daughter is gone?
It was implied that he was about to tell Una, like, because he was like, I know what happened over those 5 hours, and it's a crazy story.
And what was the point of making them not remember?
Right.
What do they get with that?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was going to be some sort of weird thing where, you ever seen Contact, Jonathan?
Yeah.
So at the end, I'm going to now recount it to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
So at the end, Ellie goes on an adventure in the giant device that they build, and we get to see her go around with the alien.
Wait, the whole movie to see the alien. It was her fucking father.
Funny about that movie, just a second. So everybody says that's everybody's complaint about that movie. At no point were you promised some sort of Independence Day type of alien thing. Like the movie's not about that.
No.
It's about like faith and science and character development. It's not about the alien. If you were there for the alien, like what? I don't understand why people thought that's what they were getting.
Right.
It was very strange to me. Anyway, it's one of my favorite Zemeckis movies. But so at the end, she gets back and she realizes that to all the other people watching, she just kind of passed through the machine as though no time had elapsed, and nobody believes her. Mm-hmm. Kind of closing the faith science loop.
Right.
But it's kind of that thing. I thought we were going to have some sort of dilemma with the Enterprise, how only he remembers, nobody believes the doctor that this happened, and some sort of conflict happens from that. But it didn't seem like that was the case. It's just like, yeah, nobody remembers. In fact, it doesn't even seem like there's any proof that anything happened.
Right.
Except for the 5 hours that everybody was lost time.
Right. And the daughter that very few people knew about is now missing.
Right.
Which really he could have just deleted the file, and then just sprayed something through the Enterprise where everybody was unconscious, and he's like, yeah, I got this great story to tell. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it just didn't land for me.
No.
I don't even think this is a genuine Star Trek episode.
It's really? There is that part where they start to go into it when he says like, oh, I was sprayed with that, and maybe that's like what happened. But that like they didn't explore that at all.
Well, the way you combat that is the daughter still in there?
Right.
And if she isn't, then it really happened.
Yeah.
Or maybe in a drug-induced frenzy, you went and cleaned house and something happened to the daughter.
What if this turns out to be a first-parter and like episode 9 shows him like just going on this hallucinated tirade, and he winds up like deleting his daughter out of the system? Like, can you imagine having to live with that? Oh man.
That'd be pretty terrible.
Yeah.
And it was even like a bad book too. It wasn't even like worth.
So the book was written by Benny Russell. Does that mean anything to you?
No.
That is Benjamin Sisko's character in the 50s.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
So we're staying with somehow this whole thing. He imagines Star Trek. Mm-hmm. It's just the imaginated.
Well, no. So what I'm taking from that is that actually means that Benjamin Sisko pulled a Jonathan Archer and leaped back into Benny Russell's body.
Can you substantiate that with anything? Like, is that true? Are we doing work?
Well, no. I mean, based on the fact that the prophets actually talk to him like in the middle and at the end through.
I forgot he's a prophet.
Yeah, through his dad. Like that's what tells me that like his consciousness was thrown back to the 50s, and it wasn't a hallucination, and it wasn't like
I don't know if I love that or if I hate that.
Well, sit on it for a little while.
Do you like that?
Honestly, it doesn't. It's just like a fun, deep Easter egg. It doesn't change anything one way or the other. Like that episode was still bad, and
it's still bad. It's like no matter how hard you try, Deep Space Nine. It's a shitty episode.
I mean, we already talked about it, but it's so disjointed. The message that it's delivering through the episode is not the message that it tells you at the end. Like that's all ultimately why it was such a disappointing episode. Like, yes, the message is good. The acting is good. Like, blah, blah, blah. We've already talked about this. You can go listen to the episode. So turning left hard, talking about Paramount Plus in general, actually talking about the writing of this episode. What I did like being a streaming show is that the acts didn't have to be the same length. Like the commercial breaks were not split up evenly. And so Act 1 did a lot of setup. And then Act 2 with the twist and the conflict was like maybe 6 minutes. I don't remember how long it really was, but like Act 1 was great length and Act 2 was super short before we got into like the actual resolution.
You've inspired me, Jonathan. I feel like I figured out how to fix this episode.
Okay.
The whole episode takes place over 2.5 years. And
okay.
You started off with the...
You love those episodes, though. They've never done it. You want that so bad.
I want it so bad.
Make it 20.
But here's why. Because so you start the episode and everyone is disoriented, or the doctor rather is disoriented, and he's like, what's going on here? And little does he know that he has been thrust into this deep kind of conflict, medieval fairy tale fantasy conflict that he has to play out, except it's a poorly written book, or rather it's just a children's book. It's like Where the Wild Things Are. Like you'd have to be an idiot to make a movie out of that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Who would do that?
Who would do that? So then he has to like play this out, kind of like what we just watched in the Royale, or what we will soon be watching after. I predict we will soon be watching the Royale and do an episode on it. But the idea that someone had to play out for their entire life the interworkings of a poorly written book, that's an interesting concept. Mm-hmm. But he still has to do it, and he has to kind of learn what all of the different political things are and be diplomatic in certain ways and learn the book so he can get to the end. And at the end, he's 2 years older, and he and Hammer are like great friends now because they've had to endure 2 years of battling a crazy witch. Is she a witch? Or she's a bad queen?
Yeah, I think she was just a bad queen. She had two wizards on her side. No, she had a wizard on her side.
She had a wizard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
yeah,
I felt like there was something I was supposed to be getting something. There's something supposed to be behind Spock being who he was. I felt like they were nudging me for something I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that would have made it better for me. I would have been fine with that, even if they kept the writing the same, because you have this kind of, they've been like suffering.
Well, and the other thing too is this episode should not have been played in real time, kind of what you're talking about. Like things should have been weird at the beginning with the Doctor and Hemmer being friends and Hemmer still being like super cranky with everyone, but actually being buddy-buddy with the Doctor. And Una's like, okay, not what's going on, but like we see this as like kind of everybody's acting a little bit weird, a little bit groggy, and then we kind of get that scene that happened at the very end with it in the sick bay and the Doctor's taking care of everybody. And Una comes in and says like, okay, we've all lost 2 years. What do you know? And that's when the Doctor's like, we saw some crazy shit. And then it's a flashback, and we get the timeline of those 2 years, and and we get more of an internal conflict and a more of a heart-wrenching goodbye rather than Daddy's gonna miss you, sweetheart. Like sorry, like it's just a point of contention for me now that I think about it. Like that is not you can't make that choice as a father, as a parent. You can't say, yes, you need to go. Like, I'm never going to see you again. You are going to basically die in my arms in this moment, and like, I know you're going to be alive and okay in this weird nebulous thing, but I'm never going to see you again. Like, this is goodbye for me. Like, parents can't make that choice.
He didn't really have a confirmation that she was going to be healed in any way. There was no scanning her.
Exactly. Yeah.
There was nothing. And so this idea that he would just abandon her, I guess he didn't abandon her. I guess he he relinquished her to
Yeah.
the nebula so she could be in good health. I mean, I agree with you. It just seems like an implausible ending from a lot of different angles.
Yeah.
And I feel like another way to increase the stakes in our 2-year arc of our headcanon that we've just now created for this episode, that the doctor makes his way throughout the course of the second, on year 1, we learn that he went into the sick bay to try and regenerate her to maybe he has to give her a shot or something every time. And she's gone. She's not in there anymore.
Yeah.
So she died a year ago. We have to finish the book anyway. And that would have given it a lot more he gets to see her again at the end.
Right. Yeah.
That would have landed better emotionally.
Right. Well, and I mean, to have that experience, he's already accepted the loss of his child, and then there she is again, and he has to give her up immediately. The dilemma there is so great, and there had to be more. He's he even says, "You can't make me choose," and he's like, "Well, you have to," and he's like, "Okay, bye."
Well, and I like the idea that he is forced to make a decision, even though he's been through hell.
Right.
And it could all go back to normal. I don't remember why they couldn't just, not in our headcanon, because that's a totally tight script, but the one that we saw, why didn't he just say, no, I don't accept, we're just going to go back to normal. We're going to put her back in the buffer and bring the Enterprise back to normal. Was there a reason that he gave?
No, just because he wants his daughter to not have the disease anymore. And that's the other thing too. He has already discovered a way to save her from another planet. And so he knows that the cure is out there. He doesn't know if he's going to find it in time, but he's found it once. And now here's this other opportunity where he's like, all right, you're basically dead to me anyway. Okay.
Dead to me anyway. See ya.
Not quite what I mean.
But I don't think there's really any science fiction in this episode.
No, like I said, they did, they briefly approached it saying maybe I got sprayed and this is all a hallucination, but that was never explored because they immediately went to, well, I must have all my memories, so it's got to be around me. Oh, wait a minute, they're in a relationship. It's got to be about my daughter. It was not explored in any way.
Right. And they had an opportunity with the nebula. If you think about Picard would try and communicate with the nebula a little bit more, learn more about it. But the doctor just gets kind of tied up with his daughter. And I would think that a curious person would be asking his grown-up daughter a lot of questions about what did you just, are you okay? Are they feeding you? What... Yeah. What are you doing? What have you been doing? What is this? Because it certainly seems worth studying since it seems like they can cure anything they want.
Well, and I guess that's the other part of it too. Here we are 3 seconds later and his daughter's 20 years older. Does that mean if he waits 30 seconds, his daughter's dead?
Yeah, I don't know. I get the impression that it's sort of this out of time, out of conscious, it's more of a consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
She showed up and maybe she felt like she was that old, but in reality, she's now immortal.
Right.
A la Q.
Yeah.
Maybe Q.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I don't think we're going to get much more of this. I think that they might be done with it.
Right.
It doesn't seem like they're setting up a new character. Although, it seemed like they totally could. Mm-hmm. They could take this character for a very long ride if they wanted to. I think I could say that differently. But you know what I mean.
I do. You're not going to throw anything else in there for...
I couldn't think of anything. Explore the character. Really open her up.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing too. We don't know if she's going to come back. We do have to base this only on this episode, but there may be a follow-up episode, kind of like what happened with Geordi and falling in love with the holodeck.
Not just holodecks. I feel like he falls in love with other machines.
Right. In Inner Light and Lessons, that's another good part 1 and part 2. I mean, maybe this is all culminating in episode 10 where you really get rewarded for watching the first 9 episodes.
So that brings to mention a phrase that does not exist. That we talked about last week. Strange New Worlds on Amazon has 4 out of 5 stars for the show.
Right.
And that seemed low to me. But we don't know why. So I thought, you and I both thought that maybe we should go and get the 1-star reviews and read them aloud and see if we agree with them.
Oh, okay.
Does that sound fun to you?
I mean, yeah, like
Again?
I already agreed with that. I was just I've been traveling, so I thought maybe you had pulled them up. Did you not?
No, I was just wanted to make sure, again, I wanted to reiterate it to you to confirm that you wanted to do that. And then we can do it next episode. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
That sound good? Or should we do that? Yeah, we should do that next episode because then we'll have the series finale to look forward to. Yeah,
Right.
so we're doing that next episode.
Okay. Where it's
So
totally
you're
gonna
okay
be
with
me.
that again?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'm sitting on the fence about the fact that the episodes that we've been disappointed by are episodes that are not proper Star Trek. And like that doesn't always happen. Like in the older series, we have said like, yes, this is a proper Star Trek, and no, we don't really enjoy it, and vice versa. But I think that just kind of speaks to that criteria even more so. Like, yeah, you can still have a good episode if it doesn't hit those criteria, but more than likely, if it doesn't nail all those things, you're going to be disappointed in that episode being Star Trek.
Right. Well, and honestly, it would seem like the moral or ethical dilemma is going to be the most common of television traits, characteristics, that kind of thing. So even non-Star Trek, like you're going to see a lot of that. And so it's I think the real meat is the science fiction,
Right.
And how they approach it and what the plot, how the third criteria meets and intertwines with the first and second.
Yeah, but that's just, I feel like that third criteria really just tips it over the edge and is what makes it a Star Trek episode. Because if it's just a mystery they're trying to solve and nobody really has to face any kind of dilemma, like that's fun, but you're not really, you're invested in the mystery and not the characters. And at that point, it really could be any sci-fi show. Like it doesn't have to be Star Trek for you to like just watch what the mystery is that's unfolding.
Right. Yeah. So, I agree with you.
Yeah.
So, should we see what we're watching next? Oh, wait.
Strange New Worlds, Season 1, Episode 9. We don't know the title.
Nobody does.
Right? I mean, I'm sure that the producers do and the writers do.
Maybe. We don't know.
Right? There's one person who, like, they have titles in a box and they're just pulling them out.
They use like machine learning to generate them. They plugged in all the original episodes and they just come up with them. That's what I would do.
I mean, if that is the case, then they would have to, like for this one, the Elysian Kingdom, like they would have to be like, okay, so that's the name of the episode. What are we going to write about?
That's actually not a bad idea. It's like a prompt. They have those writing prompts. They might do that. You never know. They might come up with the title first.
Right? Yeah, maybe. But yeah, nope, no episode 9 title yet. So we're just gonna have to wait and see what it is next week. But I've been Jonathan.
And I've been Paul.
And this has been The Measure of an Episode.
But you already knew that.
Nice.
Who was I?
Hammer.
No, Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford.